Welcome to the Ship It Podcast. I'm Brandon, and we've got a bunch of people here today. Started off with Matt.
Hey, I'm Matt Merrill.
I'm Matt DiDomenico.
I'm Ian.
Dave Elfke.
Ian doesn't get last names. Today we're talking about scaling, aka what I've dubbed "You Are Not Facebook." And I called it that because it seems like a lot of customers that we've worked with, and just people in general, try to solve problems like you are becoming the next Facebook. Like, let's solve that today. Let's just put on all this work to prepare to scale down the road, but kind of end up solving problems that you don't have yet. So that's the theme. We've all dealt with this kind of thing before, both in our personal projects and like dealing with clients that kind of impose some things on us like this. What was that acronym? I always
YAGNI.
YAGNI.
You ain't gonna need it.
Yeah, that's a good thing to follow. I remember when I worked at Fullscreen, I was doing that. I was doing a lot of that, like, well, I'm writing this. It takes in extra parameters. It can do this thing. If we need it later. And they're like, you're not going to need it. YAGNI, like, stop doing that. And they had to slap me on the back of the wrist a couple times for that. But it was better. I became like a better developer for it. It's weird to solve problems that don't exist, but it feels like the right thing to do.
It makes you feel important.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like you should get paid for it.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm trying to do the best. I'm trying to be like an ace, a maverick, I'm gonna just, see the future and try to solve for it now. So how do you avoid doing that? Like, it's easy to get in this trap of like, oh, well, maybe we'll have to like add caching here, or maybe we're gonna have to like change this store later to, I don't know, do X, Y, Z. But like, are there like code smells? I guess is what I'm getting at.
I think the first one that comes to mind is performance. I mean, there's lots of reasons that people do that, but like, just unless if it's really bad what you're writing, just don't optimize it now.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as that. Just like, yeah, you could set up caching and set up all these like scalable servers and like all this crazy stuff, and just use it. And if it becomes a problem, then solve it, because you're going to make your code a lot more complex, and you might not ever need to. So just like keep it simple as possible for now.
I see a lot with like AWS pipelines too. People know of AWS, think that they should be on it because all these big companies are on it, and they just want all their stuff to be on AWS because they're like, we'll get speed and scalability and all this, and it's like they don't understand the DevOps challenge of doing that.
Yeah, and there's like 6 people who do DevOps in the world too, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it obviously depends what like stage you're at, but I mean, I think that's probably one of the reasons that we advocate for Heroku at first.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Jesse's big on this too. He always says like, get it running first and then worry about the rest later. It's like the hackathon mentality of just like, but it's so easy to not do that because I think there's, for me anyway, it's like almost embarrassment. Like other people are going to see this shit code that I wrote. Yeah. And I just don't want, I'm going to be judged. So let me polish it. Like, let me put this PR out there. But like, okay, great example. This like internal app we have called Ground Control that Jesse, he says he writes it while he's drinking wine late at night and learning Vue. But I like looked at the code for it and it was like, it needed some like, I put in a couple PRs to sort of like clean some things up. But he doesn't care. Like he has no like hubris about that. It's just, but it's running, it's working. Like it's deployed software that's doing fine.
Do you think part of the problem is that like you compare it to the last thing you were on? So it's like you work on this project that's been around for like 10 years, and you have this crazy pipeline that does all this CI and CD and like automated testing, and
it's got the bells and whistles.
Yeah, it uses CDNs and like Akamai, and it's just like, yeah, but that's like after 10 years you needed those optimizations.
Yeah, you're supposed to grow to that. Right. Yeah, that's true. We should say that. Like we do advocate for Heroku a lot because it's, if you haven't used it, it's really easy. It's like I'm trying to think of what to compare it to actually. I don't really know other services.
It's like Beanstalk, but
that's
even higher level, right?
Yeah. Actually, I had to. So we use Heroku for Meat Eater, and the other day I noticed I was like, oh, I got like a notification because of like their threshold I had set for an alert had like been breached, and I was like, oh crap. So I opened up their analytics, and for whatever reason they had just a ton of users on the site suddenly. So I went in and I was like, one more dyno. It just like dropped down. I was like, that was easy. Yeah, that was it. That's my kind of scaling. That's how I like to scale.
Was that already set up to have like multiple nodes? Was it load balanced, or did you just scale up the instance in that case?
In this case, it was just scaling up the instance, so it's just like more memory on that.
Yeah, so just scale it up for now.
Yep.
It's not really a big deal.
Yeah, but even when you go to like multiple, like the clustered kind of setup, it's pretty straightforward and handled to do that way. But we were talking about this too, like load balancers. It's we had talked about why it's important to know that they exist and why you need them. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to write all your code for it today, but like don't shoot yourself in the foot either.
I always use the term "don't paint yourself into a corner." I think one thing that helps me like keep a sense of reality on this is thinking about not thinking about what other developers are going to think of my code, but think about what the user is going to think of the end product instead. So our job is to provide some functionality to users, right? If you can keep that in your mind, you're probably going to want to drive towards something that you can show as opposed to something that will impress other developers, right?
That's a really good point. And it makes me think of if you were to bring the result of your work to a stakeholder, like say a board member or a customer, and a customer says, we have this bug that we're hitting all the time and I can't finish this thing I'm trying to do. And you come back and you're like, but now it scales. What do you think their reaction's going to be? They're like, well,
cool.
What is better now? Like, well, in the future, we can potentially scale this thing out and more people can use it. You're like, yeah, but...
Did I just pay you for that?
Yeah, I just paid you my monthly subscription the other day. That was due. And we didn't get anything.
Yeah. It's a giant process of learning, too. So, when you show that to some stakeholder, they might be like, oh, well, we don't even need this thing. Forget about it. Build something else instead, right? So, you don't want to waste your time on that.
Yeah, I mean, how many apps or projects have you worked on where the thing pivots or it just dies?
That was my other point. I've been on so many of those. I try to think what happens if this gets thrown away tomorrow?
Yeah.
How upset am I going to be? I just spent 3 days putting in a CI/CD pipeline into AWS, or I put something together with the Create React app or something like that.
Were you the one who had someone here we had interviewed had not shipped something for 2 years? Had worked on
4 years.
It was you. Oh God, how do you Were you scaling the entire time?
No, so we were good. I would say we were good on the scaling aspect of things.
we
we did no scaling. Yeah, we had no scaling. So we were good in that department. As far as we didn't have all the fancy stuff like Circle CI or anything for deployment. All our deployments were manual. But then again, since we weren't actually, we didn't actually have users, deployment wasn't really a concern. But no, that was one thing I would say that we actually did pretty properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it manually FTP servers?
We SSH'd in and
When's the last time you FTP'd into something?
Well, nothing.
Just about 10 minutes ago.
Really?
Helping my friend with the WordPress site.
That's funny. I was thinking that was my last time I had to FTP into a WordPress site to download some images. That's it.
Yeah, they don't have a staging environment or anything. You just kind of edit the site.
Yeah. When we talk about scaling, it depends on how long we've been doing this, but it used to be FTP into a thing and change WP config or SSH into a box and be run top and be what is using up all my memory. But now I haven't SSH'd into something in a while for do something like that. There's tools on top of that we use, right? What you're saying, DevOps people in the world, it's that's a whole beast on its own.
Yeah, the other day I had to SSH into a container that runs the migrations for our databases, but I needed help from a real DevOps person.
That was kind of like an edge case kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was kind of just the pipeline could have been set up to avoid it, I think, but just the way that we have it set up.
So where do you think our responsibility lies in terms of we're engineers? There is obviously overlap in terms of DevOps. There's overlap in terms of testing and QA. There's a lot of overlap in different areas, design. In terms of figuring out how much effort we need to put in early on for scaling, I'm wondering, is it something we should be focused on, or is it more that we should be focused on doing less early on?
That.
That's
my opinion. I mean, to me, that's one of the jobs of a proper DevOps person is to take something that a development team creates and help scale it out. That. I mean, yeah, as a developer, you're going to have to do some of it. This is touching on the conversation that we had before too. Where does server-side development and DevOps end and begin? Right?
Yeah.
But a real DevOps team should be able to take that code and scale it out for you, so you can focus on getting the thing that works, right? And then there's that ever-present I don't know what you want to call it, but animosity. That's not really a good term between the development team and the DevOps team, which is funny because that's not what it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. But they should be the ones saying you guys really need to cut down memory utilization in this piece of the code because we can't scale it. That's the cue I feel we should be looking for. Yeah. But that's ideal world. You don't always have a DevOps team.
I would say if you have a DevOps team, you're probably already pretty big, right? So the fact that you have a DevOps team is probably a good
Touche.
sign that
Probably.
that it's time to scale. You know, so
Yeah, so I guess if you were like a startup and you had like you're the jack of all trades developer and you've gotten money and you're like the one guy there and you're like you need to like prepare to maybe scale this as people come on board. Do you start with AWS? Do you just put on Heroku and then figure it out later? Like, is it truly like I see in the startup world it's different. It's like you gotta have so many problems to tackle right away. It's literally like just put out the fires as they come up, or do you try and like prepare to not have those fires down the line? You know, there's some customers we have where they talk about this. Was it a J curve or that hype thing where it basically there's like this disillusionment phase of like putting in all this time and effort to prepare for this inevitability, and then the idea that I was sold by one of our customers was that like after you get out of that trough of disillusionment and hell, that you're going to be everything's going to be smooth and it's going to be great because you've built all these tools and you have all this stuff, and then it doesn't usually end up going that way. You end up being like, oh, we've spent a lot of time working on this and now we're not even either not going to use it at all. We're going to use like 10% of it. It seems like a big waste of time and money, but you could like, here's a great example. Component libraries. What if you're going to build... Yeah. For those who aren't in the room, Davo just rolled his eyes. Like I think he might have been able to hear it.
I cringed a little. It hurt.
You don't like component libraries?
No, I do. I don't think it should be like the first thing you make.
Yeah.
Oh, I would never make. Well, at some point, but I would never
the first
even have
thing
it
I
on
would
the table to begin with. Yeah,
I think it's something you go back for and like refactor later.
definitely. Make some money first. Get some users.
I feel like it's like version 4.
Okay.
It's at some point, but definitely not early. Yeah.
Well, there's certain things like, you know, Adam talks about it. Adam Fraser works here. He's worked on a bunch of component libraries, but he also was talking about accessibility, and it's one of those things you want to like think about early on, because going back to refactor, it's a real pain in the butt. Even something as simple as like tab indexes, you know? So those are like those kinds of things. But then you got to think about like what your customers like. Is accessibility the number one thing? Maybe it should be.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
Again, I think it's one of those situations where you just need to be aware of it so you don't paint yourself into a corner when you're structuring your components. Just what if I needed to do that someday? Like just asking that question is almost enough unless it's some explicit requirement.
Do you think that there's like a list of those questions you could give to a junior person who hasn't gone through those things before? You know, here's a little checklist.
We should make that.
Yeah, there you go. Like accessibility. Do you need to do that right now?
I mean, I think it's going to depend on the industry too, right? I mean, who's your target audience? I think most of the times you wouldn't probably optimize for accessibility, but if you're making something that should be accessible, I think you'll know it.
Yeah. If it's like government related, you're like probably going to want to make that accessible. Like just, you know, it depends on the vertical.
Something maybe in the medical field, you know?
Yeah.
Like where the primary user is somebody that's not well.
But I think the key there is, you know, if you're not sure, ask. Don't just assume and do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you should know. You should know.
No, I think that's a good point, though. I think it's all about knowing your customer base. You knowing your product. Because I mean, for example, we started off by saying that optimization isn't necessarily an important thing to start out with, but you know, depending on if your demographic is an audience maybe in another country where the average person has 3G internet or something. Maybe that is a good example of something where optimization is important.
Yeah, there's other things like the type of product that it is. So like if your product scales depending on users, then like we were talking about with being able to, setting it up so that it could scale quickly either out or up. It kind of depends. Like if the product you're delivering isn't an app, but it's an API and one user could actually provide a huge amount of traffic. Say we're building a product like Segment or something. Like if one big user, if you get one customer, they could bring you down pretty easily if they're sending you like 100,000 events a minute or something like that. I mean, even that's not that bad, but once you get another customer, so I mean, it kind of depends on
that's
the
really
way that
high
your product
traffic type
scales.
of product though, because like every interaction, every page load,
Yeah,
there's gonna
exactly.
be like APIs calls going back and forth like constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I might have to cut this part out. We'll find out. But when early on, they were doing this thing where they had a batch ingest kind of idea. It's like, hey, you've got all your assets. There are tons and tons of files, these big media companies, and so they made this special API so you can just push all that into right into the.
I was going to bring that up actually based on my short stint with that specific thing.
At the time, early on, they had to specifically tell customers okay, well, you're doing a batch ingest tonight, and how much is the data, and how long? Like, okay, so it'll take this long. Like, tell your customer not to do it until tomorrow, because it was just like that was the best. But that was like, to be fair, in the startup world, that was like, let's get something, and then we'll get there eventually. Like, we'll fix it as we get there. But so their solution at first was just be like, just don't use it right now. It's busy.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a reasonable approach, though, because otherwise they might not have been able to use it at all, because they'd still be building it.
That was profound.
Yeah, it's like, if it's not perfect, well, there's always I'm gonna get the phrase wrong. It's like don't let the enemy of perfect be good enough or something like that. But
Perfect is the enemy of done.
Yeah,
Something like
I can't
that.
remember what it is. Basically, don't shoot for perfection. It's like
This is the podcast where we butcher well-known quotes.
I think we've done that on every single one so far. Yeah, it's just get something out there, even if it's like kind of buggy and not working. I'm starting to have this mindset of like adding more logging in early on, like Rollbar or Sentry or something like that, because there are so many errors that I don't know happen on sites that I'm building, and I have no idea if it's like a performance thing or like that might have been the issue with Meat Eater's alert that came to me. Maybe it was some part of the site that caused a bug and like it hit a spike. I don't know.
If you don't know that they happen, then they can't hurt you.
That's right. Yeah,
That's
they
the
don't
other
exist.
approach.
You just close your eyes.
Yeah, just stop my feet. So. All right. Well, is there other stuff we can? Well, I mean, aside from like coming up with a defined list, which again is like it depends on what you're going to build, right? Like if I'm going to build a government site or I'm going to build a mobile app or whatever, that list of like how to scale and what to prepare for is going to change every time. I think that seems like there's two takeaways here, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm missing one. It seems like just get something out there is like the most important thing, and it being perfect is not key. And like don't try to prepare for some future that you haven't hit yet. Yeah. Because you're probably just going to waste your time.
Microservices.
You don't like microservices?
It's pre-optimization.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
You don't need them.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very circumstantial. I mean, the one I was thinking about as an example is just like a function that formats currency. Okay. You need it in this one place, and then like for some reason it's your first project. You have all these microservice setups, and that's terrible grammar, but like you want to pull that into some common area, and it's like, well, then somebody has to maintain it in that one place now. So there's another project needs something slightly different, and then you add another option that's like optional, and then somebody else does that, and you end up with this like, it's like I just want it to look like a number, and it has like 5, 6, 7 parameters because all these people need these special cases, and like you really should have just waited and duplicated a couple times and built up the different use cases that will like come up with a better abstraction.
Yeah, because you're probably trying to solve problems that are working for everybody, but in trying to be flexible, and in doing so, you're actually making them way more complex.
Right, and I mean, maybe there's some maybe that becomes 2 different functions. That's fine. Like you don't really know until you get there. Yeah, and I feel like that's pretty similar.
I've fallen into that trap of like the don't repeat yourself. Like, oh, I got to dry out this code. I don't want to like duplicate this thing. I don't want to write it twice, and go so far as to be like, all right, let me make this other library now that I'm going to like import, and I'm going to maintain this as like my common code place. And oh, now I can share it on the client and the server. But then you have this other thing you got to maintain and take care of, and it's like,
yeah, it's sort of the same way, that I do feel about like microservices, especially early on in like products for kind of like startups and stuff where you do need to build it kind of faster. Like the kind of tooling that you have to put in place around microservices just for local development is just such a pain when you're trying to write like an app in a reasonable amount of time just to get people to use it. I mean, obviously setting it up with Docker Compose or something like that, but then just configuring cores on every project and that type of stuff. It's just a pain to run locally, and you're just like adding a barrier to actually getting your potential customers to use it to see if they even want to use it.
Well, the release cycle becomes a chore too, right? So I had some older, I guess we'll call it like a monolith that I worked with for a while, where it took like, I don't know, it was like 45 minutes to release or something, and everyone was like, it takes so long, there's bugs, it needs to be fixed, and like we have to wait for this build and for it to release and everything. It's like, well, in order to change that one thing, I have to change it in this repo. It's like the common library for it, and then I need to pull into my UI and like
And
each
then-
one of
then
those you need to
anything
make a
that's
pull
using it-
request
yeah.
that does the build, and then you push it out, and then it releases it. You do that like all these steps along the way. So like if you have to change your UI and your backend, and then there's like some common shared server and like a definition stored somewhere else. It's just like you're changing like 5 places. They all take like half an hour each, and they're relatively linear things. So it's like, yeah, 45 minutes isn't ideal, but each one of those things took 30 minutes, and you add them all up, and it takes way longer to fix that, critical bug.
But even if, let's say you update a formatting currency function in this like library like that, and it's for one website that needed it, one of the apps that's using it. Like if you're really truly doing it the right way, you would go through, like, you've now changed that thing, so any of your other apps that are using that library should all be tested again, right? Like smoke test, just to make sure that like nothing broke and everything's like working properly. So
Yeah.
and it's like,
It depends
all
how
I
you write
wanted
it.
was a number.
Yeah, it depends how you write it, obviously, and if it's versioned and versioned correctly, and all that, definitely.
I'm sitting here trying to come up with like a rule of thumb. Like if you're starting out with a project, like what's a good rule of thumb?
Lazy.
Be lazy. That's a
actually
good one.
yeah,
that's
that's
a good
not
one. What I was gonna say is if you're using more than 1, maybe 2 Git repos, you're doing it wrong at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like I feel that way anyway. So
Yeah, I can see that.
And I feel like 2, like you'd have to have a really good.
The only reason I can see
excuse
for
for
2 is if I had, I wanted to do like a static site on one side and then an API as like the other service.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
But
Yeah, I think always starting with the UI and the API and separate repos is pretty good. Especially just, I mean, you probably want to put your UI on some type of CDN or something. It's just, I mean, that's not a big deal though. But I think that's for sure the way to start. Anything more than that is probably too much. I understand like wanting to have services owning their own domain of the data, but it's just, like we said, something that you could probably hold off on until later.
Well, you have all these other problems too then, right? Because there has to be some way to communicate between those APIs sometimes, or sync that data, which becomes a nightmare. And it's like, it's even more problems that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Just because you want to be prepared for a theoretical future that may never come.
Yeah.
On personal projects, I've started even combining the server and client, even just into one repo. Even though,
I've done it in the past, like
Yeah.
all the time.
And now that I'm doing like Nux projects, when I spin things up on the side, like it's built that way. So I just already in one and like, just keep moving. Yeah. It's, I like that. Be lazy. It seems like such simple advice, but that's actually, I mean, if you think about like a hackathon kind of thing, you're not like, all right, let's get my
Some people
UML
do
diagram
that.
out on the board. Like,
No, I think,
Some people
I think
do.
a sense of urgency also comes into it too. If you have like a deadline or a timeline or something, that'll try to hopefully keep you from getting too far off course.
Yeah.
that's true. Because then you could be like, well, I didn't get this thing launched in time, but man, it's going to scale.
It's interesting though, because like people, that's a thing that in engineering where people get really upset about like these hard dates. Because I mean, to a degree, a lot of times they are pretty arbitrary, but I mean, it can be based around like funding or.
Or moving off of a previous client that they were already paying top dollar for, and they're like,
Yeah, and then some things that we've definitely across various projects here run into is that like their business is seasonal mostly, so like something has to be done before some certain event in culture.
that's what Meteor's like that, right? Hunting season's in the fall, and like they do a lot of their PR around that. So
Yeah, there was like where Adam was working before at Boundless, like the textbooks thing, like it had to be done before they went to college, or else like
You're gonna
they
miss
just
out on-
they lost all their business.
yeah, time. It's because we've seen this at places where there is no time limit, and things just get built for years, and 4 years, just get built for years and never get deployed or whatever, and then we come in and we put down a timeline, and then something gets built in like 3 months, which is. It doesn't have all those like the bells and whistles, but like you get there,
But then you get to find out earlier, like, is this what people want? Are we like even close, or?
Well, I think we're getting better about that as an industry. Instead of being like you build it once and you're done, it's sort of like this is the thing you have to tend. You got to like maintain this project and take care of it and pay attention to it and keep it going.
Making the feedback loop smaller, basically.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times where I run into the problem of kind of things like that is where it's like a smaller startup and the employees there are probably in jobs before that where they probably weren't working with the exact stuff that they wanted to. They were working on the same thing for a long time and they didn't get to experiment with new stuff. And then they come to this new greenfield thing and they want to do all of the things that they weren't able to do before and try out all these new like design patterns and different paradigms and stuff, when that's really like the business doesn't care about that stuff, but it's just like their personal gratification after being bored for like 2 or 3 years at some like company where they're just like adding tiny little features. Like their whole sprint might be adding like some dialogue to ask someone if they're sure they want to do something.
I did that exact thing.
Oddly
I
specific.
was like on a project, and then I was like doing small things, and then after I left that company and was doing a different project, I like got really into like setting up linters for like 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a good example. It's just like
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's like to your point. Like they don't care. The customer doesn't care if I use like BEM in my CSS style names and stuff like that. Like they just care if it works or not. Like
That what were you talking about though? I was actually thinking about this the other day, and like why people use the newer versions of Angular, and I feel like that's kind of like it's the compromise. So these companies, especially the larger ones, adopted like 1 point whatever, and I feel like these people are like, well, we want to use React, we want to use whatever's new, because they're just sick of it. It has its own problems. They want to move away from. They're like, well, we already invested in Angular, so how about the new Angular? And then they get sick of that. They're like, what is this? Yeah. And I think the same thing happens.
yeah, I mean that's true. It's something you gotta like watch out for. I think it's important for us too when we're like hiring people that came from somewhere where they felt oppressed. We're like, well, let's throw you on this project. Like, don't do that thing that I know you want to. Like, I know you want to like write all this stuff so bad. Just don't do it. Like, you probably think Parcel's the coolest thing under the sun, but like we'll get there. Like, don't worry about it right now. Yeah. Well, we're tracking pretty decently on time. Do you want to go around and do picks right now?
sure.
You go first.
Why me?
I went first last time.
All right. Mine's kind of like a news thing / like PSA, but this started to hit mainstream media not too long ago, and I don't mean like as compared to like weird underground like conspiracy theory stuff, but like more like tech related stuff. But it's something I think it's worth checking out. But the new proposal for the version 3 of the plugin system for Chrome, I think is the right way to phrase it, might actually kill off popular ad blockers like uBlock Origin, AdBlock Plus.
Do you all use ad blockers?
I do.
I do.
I have never used one.
I unblock selectively. If it's a good site, like if I use the site and I want to support them, I'll unblock.
I just don't mind ads. I don't care.
It depends how like privacy oriented you are too, because they track like everything and fingerprint you and stuff. I mean, like maybe I'm sounding really crazy right now, but I think there are like a good amount of people that like do care about like not being tracked.
I like it.
Yeah. No, I definitely like
to sell you.
Well, that's probably why you like Pick so much. Also, because you just like to learn about things that exist that you don't know about.
That's exactly
that you
right,
might want. And
Like things that you're probably gonna like Instagram ads are really good for me because I'll like swipe through there. I'm like, I didn't know this was a thing. This is so cool.
yeah, exactly. That's actually probably one of my only sources of ads is because it's on my phone. But a lot of the times the ads are pretty good. And I assume the ads on Facebook would be similar since it's the same.
It's such a weird thing for me to hear, to be honest.
I feel like
I
I
want
the
commercials.
Yeah.
You want commercial?
Well, no, that's what he's
That
saying.
was-
That sounds weird. Yeah.
You confused me there.
That's actually interesting. Well, since we're talking about ads, we might as well. I went cable cutter years ago. Didn't have back in 2005 or whatever, and I paid for YouTube Red, and I have Spotify Premium, so I don't have ads in anything that I watch. And
What is YouTube Red now? Is that YouTube Premium? They've renamed it, I think.
Well, they have YouTube TV, and I think
you're
YouTube
mixing
Premium.
that up with
Yeah.
what's the other site? YouPorn?
Oh, do they have that? Yeah. Do they have
They have a Red. It's called Red, and I think that's part of the reason that YouTube branded
know
away
that.
from that.
That's really funny. Good for them. Good for YouPorn to ride those coattails.
No, don't reveal your pick here.
I need to get my referral code first before we go there.
They should just keep renaming their Plus service or whatever it's called to force YouTube to keep changing theirs.
Well, when I would want to go to bars and stuff now, and if there's a TV in the background, I pay way more attention to the commercials. I'm like,
Me
what is
too.
this commercial I've never seen? I treat it like content.
TV's this mysterious thing to me, and just like a fly. It's,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
So that's
But-
my PSA.
But we should.
Yeah, there's actually this coffee place near my house that their TV only plays infomercials.
That's awesome.
It's actually on Sunday, me and my wife will go get coffee and stuff there and just sit there and I just watch the infomercials.
It's the late night programming.
I feel like I had this idea a while ago of having a website that was like just commercials. So like commercials as content. So if you just wanted to go see an ad, you would just go to this like a destination, like a YouTube for content.
I think that's called YouTube trending now.
Well, I mean, like it's literally meant for people to just host their ads there, and it's like,
There is sites like that where you can go watch them and you get paid for watching them.
what?
Do you remember back in the
there's a
day,
few.
you could install like an extension or toolbar in your browser, and then you just got, as you browse the web, they would just show ads in that toolbar, and you got paid to keep it up.
This is exactly what I don't want.
Yeah, that was a thing though.
I remember I used NetZero for a long time because it was
yeah.
this big banner right across the top, free internet
It's like while you're connecting, I think it would show you the ad or something.
Or always.
the whole time.
Yeah, I showed.
Oh, it was the whole time.
I used one called Free iNet. That was like the internet service
Sounds like a
provider
virus.
Yeah.
It basically was.
I mean, we did that. Did you have Kazaa way back when?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or LimeWire. Remember that time we just like straight up infected our computers with AIDS so we could have free music?
That was the cost. That was the price.
Yeah,
Back then, I mean, computers were so slow, you'd know if you had a virus, though.
that's true.
It was like one additional operation. It's just like your computer did it.
Plus a mechanical hard drive. It's like, something's bad. Yeah. All right, we'll keep the picks going. So mine's, I've just finished this audiobook called Bad Blood. It's about Theranos and how they came to power and how they were dismantled by this like awesome, deep journalism in this Wall Street Journal article. And it's just like a good tale of like, you see it all the time in Silicon Valley. People will show you something, demo something, kind of like dance around it. Maybe they're like lying a little bit in the demo, like it kind of works, it kind of doesn't do all the features, and then they get investor money and you go on to the next stage and you fix that thing that didn't work. And
This is BitConnect?
no, well, it sounds like that, yeah. So they did that for years. Like they just kept that lie going, and they're like, yeah, it'll work eventually. And then they took on tons of money, and it did not go well. And
Wait, is this a true thing?
oh
Or-
yeah, big
Okay.
time. Yeah, it's a pretty good cautionary tale. Good book, yeah. Bad Blood,
My turn?
yeah.
All right, so mine is, and I have it up here because it's a long title, The Idea Factory, Bell Labs and the Great Age of American Innovation, otherwise known as The Idea Factory. And it's about Bell Labs and how it came about. It's real. I like tech history, so this is like really interesting stuff. But like they have little things about like how they got like theoretical physicists to talk to engineers by like putting them in different buildings, but making sure the cafeteria was at the center of the campus, and like really cool little things like that.
Maximizing interactions, kind of thing.
Yeah, really good tech history. So yeah, if you're interested in that.
So sticking with the theme of scaling, there's this service. Maybe most people know this, maybe they don't. But there's a service called Now by a company called Zeit. I think it's pronounced Zeit. It's the guys who make Next.js, the people that make Next.js. And it's just something, maybe if you're not ready for AWS or such a large scale solution, it's something that you could get in the middle, like more along the lines of a Heroku, but an alternative to that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. All right, Ian.
So my pick is going to be a recent introduction to me actually by Brandon, which is Tab Soda, because I never knew it was a diet soda, and now I have another option, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Tab Clear.
They make Tab Clear?
That was a thing.
Oh.
I don't know. I would
It
weird.
was. I think
Clear
it was,
diet sodas. I don't think I
banned
trust that.
for. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
banned.
It should be banned. That's not.
That was a big thing.
Oh,
Not safe.
it's basically a different tasting Diet Coke. It's pretty good.
Yeah, Tab. Who knew?
Who knew?
Code Monkey likes Tab and Mountain Dew. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thanks everyone for coming, and until next time.